This is WVBN from around the world. From the League of Nations. This week, oddly, the fate of the League of Nations Grand Project seemed to turn on the actions of a charismatic bell captain who assembled an improvised international fleet, violently lifted the Morgana siege of Rotterdam, and then took to Dutch airwaves to argue for the importance of the upcoming Zurich conference. It was almost shocking proof that an international neutrality fleet could be effective, that bells could overcome language barriers as well as the Morgana mist, and that hope for a better world wasn't entirely unreasonable. From Italy, Spazio Vitale. After the startlingly quick fall of Poland, the focus of the war now shifted to the Western Front. How strong was Germany truly, and how long could Italy remain neutral and yet be counted among the strong? In the Battle of Empires, one could not sit still for very long. The Morgana attacks on Genoa and La Spezia had left Italy angry, and now that was paying dividends. Citizens flocked to the ports and harbors to sign on with the Regia Marina. It was among the best weeks for recruitment in the whole war, and the government took no small degree of satisfaction from it. The planners now cast their gaze across the Adriatic Sea. The jewels of the coastline of Yugoslavia were cities built and fed by Venice in its glory days, and by Rome before that, and Italy had not forgotten. What that would mean, whether diplomatic overtures, military pressure, or outright invasion, was locked within the mercurial mind of Mussolini. New orders were issued to the Regia Marina to maintain war footing for the possibility of a specific and limited conflict not to exceed 3 months in duration. Refits were to be delayed and attrition patched as much as possible during this period. Of course, some wondered if more attention should have been directed towards the Aegean, where the general weakness of the British Navy increasingly invited recognition of a new dominant naval power in the Mediterranean. Then again, perhaps the old line wasn't so weak after all, and perhaps the Greeks were willing to gamble on it. From Japan, the Northern Road. In the wake of the attack on Tokyo, the army had begun fortifying the coast. For Prime Minister Yonai, there were still fires for his young government to put out. Rumors of the Funayeri sedition spreading her poison in the Yellow Sea and along the Korean peninsula required responses both dramatic and subtle. The IJN increased its presence in the areas the enemy had found to be vulnerable, and potential intelligence assets were sought out on land. There would be no uprisings, there would be no threat to Japanese control. Not so in the south. The IJA had sent 100,000 men to fight the Chinese in Changsha and to deliver a win that would wipe away the stain of their defeat in Nomahan. And this week those men were defeated by the armies of the Republic of China. It was a bitter blow to Japanese prestige, regardless of who was in power. Unpleasant questions about the strength of Japan's heretofore steady hold on the Guangdong bridgehead around Hong Kong began to raise questions that the government couldn't easily answer. Meanwhile, in the waters near Formosa, Funayeri seemed to be hunting for something or someone, and in ever-growing numbers. Japanese observers at the embassy in Warsaw were permitted to depart before the city fell. But what they observed was that Germany's feat of arms offered lessons far beyond what the IJA was presently capable of. An alliance between the Germany and the Soviet Union was therefore of great concern. From the United States to Ocean Navy. The first priority for the nation after the conclusion of the Panama Conference was the Panama Canal itself. FDR knew the Morganas couldn't be allowed to block the easiest line of communication between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The Army began expanding the defenses at Forts Amador and Grant, and additional land was leased from the very nervous Panamanian government to be developed into additional fortifications. Inspections of all ships transiting now took place well away from the torpedo booms. Trade through the Caribbean was buoyed by the strong presence of the American battle fleet. In the need to escort supplies and currency to Panama, the U.S. Navy temporarily limited its escort duties further north, and the Morganas took advantage. The Germans did not. In one case, the SS City of Flint was briefly intercepted by a German vessel, only to be promptly released back to her own itinerary, with as much information as the Germans could provide about Morgana activity in the area. More insultingly still, the Morgana cowardice began to make its presence more widely felt, as if suggesting or taunting that the American emphasis on consolidation, preparation, and defense actually reflected a lack of resolve. The fall of Warsaw in just 6 weeks prompted great interest in the army, and although the collapse of resistance was fast, it was probable that the entry of the Soviet Union was the decisive factor. It prevented Polish lines from stabilizing the front and turned the invasion into a quagmire similar to the Great War. Certainly some lessons could be drawn about the uses of aircraft, however. From the United Kingdom, the Royal Indian Navy. 2 weeks ago, the Royal Navy had made a furious effort to drive Morgana forces away from the shores of India. This week, the British government began to take advantage. Patrols were heightened, and investment, training, and currency flowed into the shipyards of Bombay. It would be a place from which the ranks of the Royal Navy might one day grow. It was an extraordinary gift to the merchant ships of the Arabian Sea as well, with the Regia Marina fighting Morganas in East Africa and the Royal Navy stamping them down in the West. The flow of commerce was alive in a way it hadn't been for a month or more. Closer to home, the fall of Poland demanded that the much-delayed BEF be sent to France. The Royal Navy had shown admirably that they could hold the channel, and despite the heavy Morgana activity along the Dutch coast and in the Skagerrak Strait, the expeditionary force began the crossing. The fall of Poland was perhaps inevitable, given the failure of the Tsar offensive and Soviet intervention. But the naval situation was altogether positive, and the strength of French defenses on the Western Front reassured even the gravest doubts. Winter, too, meant the strength to be gathered in a methodical way. Now the questions were how effectively the blockade would be, and where best the armies could be placed to disrupt what was clearly going to be a variant of the Schlieffen Plan. The Greek government responded to growing ties between Turkey and Italy by close consolidation with the Minister of Greece. The Finns have sent a delegation to London, but it's unclear the degree to which Chamberlain's position has changed since June. Meanwhile, Morgana activity noticeably increased near the train lanes at the Cape of Good Hope. In France, the Eastern Question. The state of the world was perilous. Now that Poland had fallen, it was only a matter of time before the Western Front became active. However, the Battle of the North Sea had stopped Germany in the Baltic for a time, and no general offensive could be expected during the winter. In any event, the experience of the Saar offensive indicated no very great strength on the border. Furthermore, the defenses at the Maginot were impregnable, and as it was certain that the Germans would try the Schlieffen Plan again, there was ample time to prepare a defense that would bleed the enemy white. Despite the shocking collapse of Poland, perhaps the threat from Germany was not so very great after all. The colonies, however, could not long be neglected. The French Antilles benefited from the successes of the U.S. Navy. Africa was untroubled by Morganas. The problems in North Africa seemed easily addressed, but Hanoi was vulnerable and very far away. Daladier and his advisors outlined the diplomatic options in broad strokes. There were 4 potential plans. Work with the alliance, relieve the policies of Georges Clemenceau, send reinforcements and material from France to other colonies, or cede a degree of sovereignty to other powers. Now it only remained to make the choice. The Finns have sent a delegation to London, but it's unclear the degree to which Daladier's position has changed since June. Elsewhere, Morgana sightings around Madagascar began to rise as their fleets drifted south away from Mogadishu. From Germany, SS City of Flint blockade loosened. Admiral Donitz relaxed restrictions on neutral trade and reduced exclusion zones, and U-boat commanders broadly agreed to follow international rules on submarine warfare as strictly as possible. It meant U-boat crews suffered far greater exposure to danger, but offered an equally reduced chance of provocation to the United States. The definitive test of the policy came in the form of a Kriegsmarine encounter with SS City of Flint, which was stopped, searched, and released without incident on 9th of October. This week, then, the campaign against Allied shipping almost fell apart. The most dangerous enemy to Allied shipping were the Morganas. Apart from the U-boats, the Kriegsmarine remained largely absent from the North Sea, following its defeat by the Allies in the previous week. And it seemed that there was an invitation to the Morganas. They crashed into the Dogger Bank and started nibbling away their way north along the Dutch coast, sinking anything afloat, including a U-boat driven out of position by hunting Morganas. The invasion of Poland came to an end, with Adolf Hitler flying into the ruins of Warsaw for a victory parade. The last Polish forces capitulated on 11th of October. The garrison of Hell attempted to flee the internment in Sweden, but the Kriegsmarine ensured that there would be no escape. The invasion had not gone to timetable, and certainly some part of that could be attributed to the Morganas and the response of the Kriegsmarine. The lessons learned had been numerous and valuable, however. Their application would need to keep until spring. However, in the interim, training and planning would continue unabated. In the end, without Allied intervention or a different policy from the Soviet Union, the Morganas had slowed the destruction of Poland, but it could not have been prevented. From the Soviet Union and off from the Rusalki. Polish resistance in Lublin was almost the last in the war, but finally even they capitulated. The rest of their troops surrendered, were destroyed seeking escape, or crossed into Romania and internment. The partition of Poland had been a test of the strength of the character of this new Germany, and it appeared that Hitler was capable of keeping his word. In the aftermath of the victory won at Polyarny, a message in a bottle made of clear diamond was brought into Archangelsk by a half-mad fisherman. He claimed the Regana Avars had given it to him, and that it was a message for the Secretary General. The message was duly passed on to the NKVD. They presumably destroyed it. If it was true that there were far fewer sightings of avarice in the White Sea and in the Baltic, then there were far more sightings of starvation, however. The city of Belomorsk, at the terminus of the White Sea-Baltic Canal, had seen the new construction at the harbor's edge. This has been WVBN from around the world.